Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us on In His Will. My name is Debbie, and I am here with Sara. Hello, Sara.
Morning, everyone.
Um, and we're going to do some Lenten reflections. We'll be doing these for this very holy week as we come into Good Friday and the Triduum. So we wanted to begin with in the hours of the Passion. And so we'll be reading from the Hours of the Passion. And um, we've selected just a few, of course, because we can't read every hour. But some of the main points as Jesus was going through this Passion. And Sara, I think that you had um, chosen a really wonderful scripture as well. Uh,
Yes.
so, could we start off with that scripture to keep in mind as we're reading this 6 p.m. hour, the second hour?
Yes. So this is from John chapter 12, the Gospel of John, I'm sorry, chapter 12, verses 27 through 28. And my version is the New American Bible, St. Joseph edition. So, verse 27 through 28, Jesus is talking. I am troubled now, yet what should I say? Father, save me from this hour. But it was for this purpose that I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a beautiful reading. I think um, it's great for us to remember that this is why Jesus came, is um, to suffer and die for us, to make reparation and to restore our relationship to God our Father. And of course, we're very blessed if we have been called to the divine will to have these hours of the Passion that we read a portion of every day to keep uppermost in our minds um, that this uh, uh, passion and death of Christ is uh, pivotal in the whole story. This He came to suffer and die, and so suffering and dying to self, dying to our will, and this is also very um, uh, prevalent and comes out in these hours of the Passion. So we'll just go ahead and start reading. I'm going to read this 6 p.m. hour, the second hour, and Jesus takes leave of his holy mother. Um, Sara, do you want to start out with the
Sure.
reading? Okay.
My adorable Jesus, as I have shared in your sufferings together with you and in those of your afflicted mother, I see that you are about to leave to go there, where the will of the Father calls you. The love between son and mother is so great as to render you inseparable. So you leave yourself in the heart of your mother, and the Queen and sweet mother places herself in yours. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for you to separate. But then, blessing each other, you give her the last kiss to strengthen her in her bitter pains she is about to suffer. And giving her your last goodbye, you leave. But the paleness of your face, your trembling lips, your suffocating voice, as though wanting to burst into tears in saying goodbye, everything tells how much you love her and how much you suffer in leaving her. But to fulfill the will of the Father, with your hearts fused into each other, you submit yourselves to everything, wanting to repair for those who, unwilling to overcome the tenderness of relatives and friends, and bonds and attachments, do not care about fulfilling the holy will of God and corresponding to the state of sanctity to which God calls them. What sorrow do these souls not give you, in rejecting from their hearts the love you want to give them, contenting themselves with the love of creatures? I think that's a good stopping point. Or
It
do
is
you
a
want to?
great stopping point because I think there are some great, great points in this very beginning. And I think we sometimes forget that this was a very full relationship because we're not only talking about mother and son. Can you speak to what you were just saying before we
Oh,
started, Sarah?
sure, yeah. So, Mother Mary, we don't know much about her in the Gospels because she's just so humble that, and what we do know, we assume that she was the one that told the Gospel writers.
Mhm.
But God the Father created Mother Mary to be the perfect daughter. God the Son created Mother Mary to be the perfect mother. God the Holy Ghost created Mother Mary to be the most perfect spouse. And she was able to encapsulate this. Like, we as Catholics, we firmly believe that she was the most perfect creature that God made. And it's just amazing to think that a human, you and I, and Jesus tells it in the gospel too, when I don't know the verse offhand, but when somebody says, "Blessed the womb that bore you and the breast that you suckled at," and he said, "No, blessed are those that listen to the will of my Father and do the will of my Father." Jesus is sharing with us how we can be more like Mother Mary in that verse. Um, she never she never put herself before her God. And I think this hour really helps us to remember that having idols doesn't necessarily mean that it's a thing. We can have relationships that come before God. And
Mhm.
if you think of your marriage as a triangle, and if God's on the top and then the husband and wife are on the bottom, the closer the husband and wife are to God, the top, the closer they are together. And that's how God formed all relationships, so that the closer we get to God, the closer we get to his creation,
Mhm.
us.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so let's go on and read a little bit more. Um, Go ahead and can you go ahead and
Sure.
read more?
Yes. My lovable love, as I repair with you, allow me to remain with your mother in order to console her and sustain her while you leave. Then I will hasten my steps to come and reach you. But to my greatest sorrow, I see that my anguishing mother shivers, and her pain is such that as she tries to say goodbye to her son, her voice dies on her lips, and she is unable to utter a word. She is about to faint, and in her swoon of love she says, my son, I bless you. What a bitter separation, more cruel than any death. But the pain yet prevents her from uttering a word and makes her mute. Disconsolate queen, let me sustain you, dry your tears, and compassionate you in your bitter sorrow. My mother, I will not leave you alone, and you, take me with you and teach me in these moments so painful for you and for Jesus what I have to do, how to defend him, repair him, and console him, and whether I must lay down my life to defend his. No, I will not move from under your mantle. At your wish, I will fly to Jesus. I will bring him your love, your affections, your kisses together with mine, and I will place them in each wound, in every drop of his blood, in every pain and insult, so that in feeling the kisses of the love of his mother in each pain, his sufferings may be sweetened. Then I will come again under your mantle, bringing you his kisses to sweeten your pierced heart. My mother, my heart is pounding. I want to go to Jesus, and as I kiss your maternal hands, bless me as you bless Jesus, and allow me to go to him. My sweet Jesus, love directs me towards your steps, and I reach you. And as you walk along the streets of Jerusalem, together with your beloved disciples, I look at you and I see you still pale. I hear your voice, sweet, yes, but sad, so much as to break the heart of your disciples who feel troubled. This is the last time, you say, that I will walk along these streets by myself. Tomorrow I will walk through them, bound and dragged among 1,000 insults. And pointing out the places where you will be most insulted and tortured, you continue to speak. My life down here is about to set, just as the sun is now setting, and tomorrow at this hour I will no longer be here, but like the sun I will rise again on the third day. At your words the apostles become sad, and I don't know this word, tactium, taciturn,
Taciturn.
taciturn, not knowing what to answer, but you add, courage, do not lose heart. I will not leave you. I will always be with you. But it is necessary that I die for the good of you all. In saying these words, you are moved, but with a trembling voice you continue to instruct them. And before enclosing yourself in the cenacle, you look at the sun which is setting, just as your life is setting. You offer your steps for those who find themselves at the setting of their life, giving them the grace to let it set in you, and repairing for those who, in spite of the sorrows and disillusions of life, are obstinate in not wanting to surrender to you. Then you look at Jerusalem again, the center of your prodigies and the predilections of your heart, Jerusalem, which in return is preparing your cross and is sharpening the nails to commit the deicide, and you tremble, your heart breaks, and you cry over its destruction. With this you repair for many souls consecrated to you, whom you tried to form with so much care as portents of your love, and they, ungrateful and unrequiting, make you suffer more bitternesses. I want to repair together with you, to sweeten the stabbing of your heart. But I see that you are horrified at the sight of Jerusalem, and withdrawing your gaze, you enter the cenacle. My love, hold me tightly to your heart, that I may make your bitterness my own, to offer them together with you. And you look with pity upon my soul, and pouring your love into it, bless me.
Thank you, Sarah. This is such a beautiful reading, and I think one of the things that we're reminded of and need to continue to remind ourselves of, as you said, um, Jesus created the perfect mother. If you could create your own mother, how wonderful would she be? And uh, she would be perfect. And uh, Jesus did. And these two hearts and souls and minds and wills were one. As you said, she only did the will of God. She knew that Jesus not only was her son, but was her God, and that her role was to mirror his will. And so when we go through these, and I think this is a great place to start because obviously this was a very um, poignant moment for them both. Jesus knew that this was going to be the last, certainly private moments that he had with his mother. And this is the one person that he knows understands the importance of doing his will, of laying down her own will. And so she was always only there for him and and doing his will. And of course, she was his mother. She carried him in her body. She
Comforted him,
comforted
fed him.
him, changed him, cared for him, as any mother does for any child. And so the pain of seeing a child, your own son, go through this horrible and bitter death, which she knew how horrible it was going to be, and had known, um, had been told from the beginning of his life that this moment was coming. She didn't know exactly how, she didn't know exactly when, she didn't know exactly where, but she knew that it was coming. And um, so he said, take courage, don't lose heart. He's saying this to the apostles because the apostles didn't know, didn't understand, they just didn't get it. And so truly, Mary was the one person that could console him because she truly understood what was happening more so than anyone else. No one could truly understand what was happening besides Jesus, but more so than anyone else, she did understand this. So this the suffering that Jesus felt, she was feeling. And I always say that grief is a two-way street because those of us who are losing our loved ones are grieving, and we're grieving that loved one. The person who is dying is grieving everyone because they're losing everything and everyone. And so, Jesus, he's going from his mother to his disciples, the people he loves most in the world, um, and has to begin to start this process of separating from them. And because of his generous, loving divinity, he's more concerned about how they're going to respond and how they're going
He's
to
more concerned about everyone.
he's more concerned about everyone than he is about himself.
Yeah,
And yet he's suffering himself because let's not forget that he is also not only divine, he is human.
human.
And so these attachments for him are very real. I want to read the reflections and practices. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Hours of the Passion, each hour, um, after reading the Hours of the Passion, there is a section on reflections and practices. And I think these sections are so important because it really gives us um, uh,
A
questions.
fullness of the meditation.
Exactly, the fullness of the meditation and what we should be meditating on and really think about and focus in on. These were reflections and practices. Of course, what we have just read was given to Louisa, and Louisa wrote them down. This is Louisa speaking, and Jesus is in Mary's words, but the narration is from Louisa. These reflections and practices are from Hannibal de Francia. And Hannibal de Francia is a saint, and he actually got there quicker than Louisa did. She's on her path to sainthood, but Hannibal de Francia really has a very remarkable life, and we'll talk about that one day. But he is the one who wrote these reflections, and I think that his great uh, spirit and his devotion and attention to the divine will really shines through in these. So the reflections and practices read, Jesus promptly leaves his mother even though experience although he experiences a blow to his most tender heart. Are we ready to sacrifice even the most legitimate and holy affections in order to fulfill the divine will? Let us reflect especially on those moments in our lives when we feel distant from the divine presence or do not feel any spiritual consolation in our pious devotions. Excuse me. This is a wonderful contemplation right here because so many times um, we feel compelled to put others first, especially if we're mothers with children, families, whatever, when we're really always to put um, God first, the divine will first, God's will first. And this part about um, not feeling any spiritual consolation in our pious devotions. This
I
is
felt that.
really
My hand goes way up for that.
yeah. This is a big issue, and I think it is for everyone in the divine will because if I've heard one common theme about practicing the divine will, one of them is this idea of how do we know that our acts are having any effect, because I don't feel any different. I
Right.
don't particularly feel the consolation that I think I should feel, knowing that souls were saved because of the act that I did. But we're not in this for consolations. We're in
No.
this to console.
Well, we will get our consolations, just not in this lifetime.
We will get our consolations. We will
Yeah.
be have a special place in heaven, actually.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I
but
would like to remind everyone, because I know I have to be reminded in those periods of desolation, uh, the fact that you're questioning it means that you're pretty much on the path that you're doing it. Because if you weren't trying to live in the divine will, you wouldn't even think about it. Like, it wouldn't even be a
wouldn't
thought.
matter. It wouldn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
So we know that we're and the I always say the wonderful part about that is Jesus tells us over and over that even when we fail and we
Yes.
don't offer our acts in the divine will because we forget or we're distracted, or the things that happen to us in daily life, we're called to be faithful and attentive to this practice. But when we fail, because we will fail every day, Jesus takes into consideration our goodwill, and that our goodwill counts for something. He knows that we're trying. He's such a good God. He knows we're trying, and he knows we're just little children down here spiritually, just trying to figure it out and do it. We're like little 2-year-olds that are like, "Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot."
And
Um,
I think that's why he tells us that, he does it for us, because
he
there's
does
no way
because
that we
we
could
can't
do
we
anything.
can't do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, those moments in our lives where we don't feel connected to the divine will, um, and we do give our attentions to other things, either because of our state of life or just because we're simply neglectful, or, um, at that moment, we're just more interested in doing what we're doing than we are in doing the will of God. And sometimes that happens. Um, so he goes on to say, Jesus did not take his last steps in vain. In his steps, he glorified the Father and asked for the salvation of souls. We too should fuse in our steps the same intentions of Jesus. That is, we should sacrifice ourselves for the glory of the Father and for the good of souls. We must also imagine placing our steps in Jesus' footsteps. Jesus did not walk in vain, but enclosed in his steps the steps of souls, and offered reparation for all of their poorly taken steps, thereby offering the Father the glory befitting him. He gave life to all the misdirected steps of souls in order that they might walk along the right path. We should do this in the same way that Jesus did, by fusing our steps in the steps of Jesus and with his own intentions. So when we do this beautiful, that we live this beautiful gift of the divine will and acting in Jesus's will, we are um, offering to him, offering to the Father the glory that he should have, because as Jesus had said in the scripture, I came to glorify the Father. Jesus didn't come to glorify himself, and Jesus is not asking us to live in his will to glorify himself. He's doing it to glorify the Father and really the Trinity, because this
Yes.
Trinity is the divine will, and it is such a, in some ways, neglected
Yes.
um, uh, focus of our devotion and our love, when all of the love, God is love. And so all parts of God are love, all aspects of God are love. Ask yourself, do we walk on the street modestly and composed so as to be an example to others? As afflicted Jesus walked, he talked to the apostles every once in a while, speaking to them about his imminent passion. And what do we say in our conversations? This is a good reflection. Um,
That should have been a Lenten penance,
yeah,
like,
that should have been a Lenten penance,
I
and
should have
maybe
I
it
should
should have
have
been
added
a
this.
headline on reflections and practices.
Yeah.
What do we say in our conversations? And one of the things that I have been particularly mindful of, and one of my Lenten, reflections has been, how much do I murmur?
Murmur?
Murmur. In the Old Testament, of course, God talks to the Israelites about murmuring, and murmuring is this quiet complaining
Yeah.
and gossiping, but mainly complaining. And this complaining kept them in the desert for 40 years.
Yeah.
And we know that we all each have our own deserts. We have our own deserts that we have to wander, our own lost times, our own times of doubt and excuse me, even rejection of everything holy. We just like, never mind. I'm gonna watch this movie. Never mind, or I'm gonna I'm gonna gossip. Never mind. Um, but what do we say in our conversations? And I think this is a wonderful. We could meditate on this every day for the rest of our lives. Um, and what was Jesus saying in these conversations? He was going to die a horrible death in less than 24 hours. He was looking at the last sunset he would experience as a human with his disciples. And yet what is he doing? He's not complaining about himself. He's not complaining about what's happening. He's encouraging his disciples. And so one of the things that I always think of as I read Jesus in his um, especially in his passion as he's speaking to everyone, is the encouragement that he gave. And so, do we walk on the street modestly and composed so as to be an example to others? This is so important in our public lives and in our private lives, but in our public lives, that we be composed, that we be kind, that we be serene. I think that this um, eminence, this serenity and peacefulness should emanate from us. We're living in the divine will. Um, he goes on to say, when the opportunity arises, do we make the passion of the divine Redeemer the object of our conversations? In seeing the apostles sad and discouraged, beloved Jesus tried to comfort them. Do we place in our conversations the intention of relieving Jesus? Ooh, there's a good one. Do we try to speak in the will of God, infusing in others the Spirit of Jesus Christ? As we meditate on Jesus going to the cenacle, we should enclose in the heart our thoughts, in his heart, our thoughts, affections, heartbeats, prayers, actions, partaking of food and work while we perform these actions. By this means, our actions will acquire a divine character. And how wonderful it would be to live our lives uh, in a divine character, that we could be a reflection of, of the divine will, of this um, perfect um, love, perfect compassion, perfect obedience. Um,
And it does take practice. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. And one of the things that I thought of um, in when you first started reading was in like 100 years ago or so, the penances that were taken by nuns or religious people were like to chain a leg so
yeah,
that they were in pain constantly all day long. And then when they couldn't stand that, they would chain the other leg. Like if we could, and they did that on purpose so that they could constantly be reminded of uh, God and having to live for God. And I think thinking about how their penances were very we give ourselves a lot of opportunities to be distracted,
mm,
to forget God. Because if we were to do something even like put a pebble in our shoe and walk around with a pebble in our shoe, because I think that was one of the penances that they used to do also, like every time you felt that pebble, you'd be like, that's right, this is for God. And it wasn't because they were trying to mutilate themselves or anything. They were trying to put God first And I never understood that when I was younger. Like, I thought that was just the most awful thing you could do. Why would God want that? And he doesn't want us to hurt ourselves, but he loves the fact that we're doing what we can to remember him, and
Exactly.
and the do in public, are we modest? Are we composed? There recently, I think it was before Lent, but recently I did, a morning mass with my kids, and it's with kids, so we rushed out the door and nobody had anything to eat, including myself. So then we went to drive through after mass because it was just closer than going home, and I was starving and sitting in the drive-through lane, and then they told me to pull up to a window which wasn't being used, and there was a box in front of it, and like I saw 3 cars passing me, and I still hadn't got my food, and the box is still in front of the window, and I'm like, did they forget about me? And so I went inside the store, and I didn't mean to be so agitated, but I was like, I've been sitting there like nobody brought me my food,
With
and
more kids.
right, we're starving. Give me my food.
and that and that happens so easily, especially when we're hungry.
Yeah,
We're tired. It's like
tired. Yeah,
lose
you
our
got 4
focus.
kids. It
Yeah.
happens all the time. So
Mhm. Yeah.
it's in these ways, like, that's part of our faith, is to know where our weaknesses are. And from what I got from that was, all right, we're not leaving the house without snacks, because mommy's not very fun when she's hangry. I was embarrassing to everyone.
Mama's not happy, nobody's happy. Uh, well, it goes on to say, and this is just what you're saying. He says, however, since it is difficult to always maintain this divine attitude, as it is hard for the soul to fuse its acts continuously in Him, we can compensate with the attitude of our goodwill. There's that goodwill. Jesus will be very pleased by this. He will become the vigilant sentry of each of our thoughts, words, and heartbeats. He will assimilate these acts within his interior and surround himself with them to keep himself company and gaze upon them with great love as if the fruit of the soul's good will. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Then, when the soul fuses itself in him and does its immediate acts with Jesus, good Jesus will feel so attracted to the soul that he will act together with the soul doing what it does, and he will transform the work of the soul into a divine work. All this is the effect of the goodness of God, who takes everything into account and rewards everything, even a tiny act in the will of God, so that the soul may not miss out on anything. Oh, my life and my all, may your steps direct mine. And as I walk with the earth, may my thoughts be in heaven. What a beautiful, beautiful meditation that, once again, he takes into um, account our goodwill. And he's very pleased that we're trying. He's very pleased that our will, um, even though we may stumble at times and not conscientiously act, and this practice of offering our acts, of acting in the divine will, not offering our acts, but actually offering our will, laying our will down and offering the acts in the divine will, um, does become a practice that is more and more and more prevalent in our lives. And this is how we advance in the degrees of the divine will, to where you're, like Louisa, she lived in the divine will, as the Blessed Mother did. And so, said he keeps himself company, and he gazes on these acts, um, with great love as fruit of the soul's goodwill. So our goodwill gives Jesus much pleasure. It gives him much consolation, and he's happy with that. But he's most happy when our will is fused with his and live in his will. So I hope that this I hope that this time, just talking about the separation from his mother and these meditations, which are so beautiful, that we can really contemplate as we're going through this week of uh, this holy week of really meditating on all of these gifts that Jesus has given us in his passion and his death. Um, and so, Sarah, any parting thoughts that you have on the meditation or?
Oh, I would like to encourage everyone, we fail. We're not perfect. And as Jesus says, he just wants us to try. And Jesus finds great comfort in a soul that is willing to start their day new. I'm sorry for, all of the things that I didn't do correctly yesterday, that I plain didn't do yesterday, or that I grumbled when I did yesterday. And today I would like to try again.
His
That's
mercies
all
are
that
new
he
every
asks.
morning. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And
Mm,
it's this is a great week to don't feel like you've missed out on Lent. We still have a whole week of Lent. And it's like when we pray the rosary, it's not, oh, I have to pray a rosary. It's, I get to pray a rosary.
yes.
So, um, yeah.
And this is our most holy season, and this is our most holy week. So, Jesus, how beautiful that we have this week to really um, renew ourselves and refresh ourselves in our devotion to Jesus. So, until tomorrow, when we have our next Lenten reflection, we say goodbye. God bless you, and continue living in His will.